Vicarian's crude torch crackled and popped. He cringed, hoping the light would not die out. And it did not, at least not yet. He looked around him, trying to discern which path to take. He desperately wanted out of this deadly ruin, but he was uncertain that bringing back merely a pearl and tales of a trap-laden Heirosian ruin would be enough to impress the shaman Vineth, let alone his entire tribe. Of all he could see at the moment, the statue seemed of most importance, so Vicarian strode through the water, up the shallow stone steps, and onto the dais. The statue was partially worn away as he'd expected, but up close he could make out its basic shape. It appeared to be some sort of bat-headed humanoid sitting cross-legged, holding a large stone tray. Lying in the tray were a number of small statuettes carved from jade. The wall that ran along the back and the sides of the dais contained a variety of engravings, including iconography which showed this bat god in greater detail. As with the whale god, the depictions portrayed a number of masked humanoids paying ritualistic tribute to the entity. Vicarian guessed that a single one of those miniature idols had to be worth at least as much as the pearl, and surely bore some sort of significance to the past of this island. But as he found himself reaching out to grab one, he pulled his hand back, not wanting to act too brashly. "Damn this place and its devices," he thought. "Surely it can't be as simple as just snatching up those statuettes." So, Vicarian's going to make a dungeoneering check to see if he possesses any knowledge about what the statue might contain in regards to devices or traps. His dungeoneering check, he rolls good. He's not very good with dungeoneering, but he rolls high. He gets a 15, so that'll be a success. Vicarian looked at the statue and the tray it held, trying to use what knowledge and wisdom he possessed. He supposed that any significant disturbance to the tray might set off another trap. So if he wanted one of those idols, he would have to pick it up delicately. So he makes a thievery check. He gets a 17, which is a success. Trying as best he could to keep his hand still, Vicarian gently lifted a single statuette from the stone tray. It resembled some sort of humanoid, but he didn't want to waste too much time examining it, and it's kind of dim here in the shadows of his makeshift torch. So he takes a step back, braces himself. No trap goes off. The room is still. So whatever trap had been set, he did not trigger it. He guessed his torch is only going to last but maybe a few minutes more, so he placed the statuette in his belt pouch, and he moved forward toward the circular archway. Beyond it is a small chamber that contains stairs rising up out of the standing water. Vicarian ascended the stairs and saw a pit in the ground before him. He could not tell how far down the pit dropped, for his candle torch had not enough strength of light, but he could hear waters flowing and crashing down below. There was enough room to walk around the pit, and as he began skirting around it, he could see the walls which circled it were covered in austere carvings and hieroglyphics. But again, he had no real knowledge to decipher such runes, so he wasted no time in examining them. However, he did take a few moments to search over the ground in front of him as he slowly walked around the pit and into this little corridor beyond. He makes a perception check, gets a 7, which is a failure. He doesn't notice anything. But as he steps, he feels something. Vicarian felt a shift in the stone floor as he stepped down. In the blink of an eye, a spear thrust out from the wall next to him. Vicarian, acting quickly, dodged out of the way. He cursed in his native tongue and continued on, scanning the ground for more traps. So again, he makes a perception check. The last trap did not hit Vicarian's armor class with its attack. He makes another perception check. This is a 10, failure. The second spear trap goes off as Vicarian steps down. The second one's attack is 21. That's a hit, and it deals 7 damage. Unfortunately, Vicarian was not as perceptive as the hunters from his village. The old spear which shot from the wall stabbed into his side somewhat, causing a little rivulet of blood to trickle down his leg. The wound was not mortal, but Vicarian felt that he was nearing the verge of collapse. As his eyes looked up, he saw the chamber ahead of him bore distinct design. Looming in the shadows, he could see several curved spikes rising up from the ground. In the middle of them stood a stone obelisk, about a foot taller than Vicarian himself. He moved in cautiously, fairly certain that the way ahead was not trapped. Upon getting a closer look, Vicarian could tell that the spikes had a certain familiarity to them. By the dim light of his torch, he saw that they were not spikes, but horns. In fact, they were identical to the horns that could be found jutting up out of the ground all over his island, the Island of Horns. He knew that this was where the island had gotten its name from, but it was something of a mystery. As far as he had heard, nobody knew where these old horns had come from, or why they stood as they did. Pacing carefully forward, he viewed more runes and depictions covering both the walls and the stone obelisk. The bottom area of the room shaped into a large angular inset. A great stone statue had crumbled and toppled over, and it now laid in chunks on the floor. Vicarian could see a few discernible traits of the statue, and they actually match up to the engraved pictures on the nearby wall. The scene was presented the same as the last two Heirosian gods, but this one seemed the most terrible of the three. Its head was that of a fish or an eel, but not the kind that one would typically find while fishing or swimming in the ocean waters, but the kind that slinked through the terrifying lightless depths, the kind that haunted nightmares and gave way to stories told around the village bonfire. The fish god held in its hand a ritual dagger which was wreathed in flame, and its expression contained little more than malice. Vicarian makes a religion check to see if he has any knowledge about what this is, what it pertains to. He gets a 12, which is a failure. He doesn't really know anything pertaining to this. Vicarian was snapped out of a haunted fixation by the sound of his torch crackling and sizzling. He did not like the feeling of this chamber, and had the statue of the fish god still stood, he probably would have toppled it himself. He took one last look at the obelisk, trying to commit any significant details to memory, then proceeded to exit. He walked past the jutting spears, one of which glinted with his blood. He went around the pit and back into the dais chamber. Somewhere inside he wondered what might lie beyond the corridors behind the dais, but he knew he could not proceed. He was too wounded, and his torch was getting ready to die out. He continued on, and he could not help but cast one last glance at the whale god and its form hunched on the wall, seeming to peer at him through its dark, socketed eye, now empty from where the pearl used to be. I will be glad to put this place behind me. This is more than I have ever faced, and probably more than I can handle. Vicarian moved into the small chamber he had originally came in through, but this is not quite over yet. He lowered himself into the flooded shaft, trying to keep his torch out of the water as long as he could. Maneuvering through the first bend, he found himself again at the edge of the steep, cascading drop he had climbed up to get in here. He had no time to hesitate, so he immediately set at climbing down. All the while, water sprayed his face and doused his torch. He makes an athletics check. This is a 26. He is quite athletic, and that is a success. So he climbs down, back into the water. Through the blackness of the flooded tunnel he swam, using his hands to guide him through the winds and twists. Holding his breath caused his side to sting with pain, but onward he swam. In less than a minute, he saw the exit back out in the coastal waters, illuminated by a glow of light from the surface. And what a welcome sight those beams of sunlight were, however softened by the rushing and swirling waters. Vicarian gripped the edge of the tunnel exit and swam out into the rough waters, trying to slip through the undercurrents without getting pulled down. Vicarian makes another athletics check to swim. He gets a 21. That's a success. Though the waters along the rocky cliffside coast were strong, Vicarian could swim well. Very well indeed. He now needs to make a perception check, because he might notice something. His perception check is an 18, and he does notice something. As Vicarian began to swim for the surface, he noticed something which made his blood run cold. Looming in the shadows of the water, not too far away, was a great, dark shape. At first, Vicarian thought it to be a shark, but as his eyes adjusted, he could see it was bigger than a shark, and it had 4 legs which helped it move along. In fact, its form resembled that of the whale god more than anything Vicarian had ever seen. Its head pointed in his direction and was approaching quickly.